She thought he had chosen power over love. She had raised her child alone for 8 years, with forged letters and a broken heart as proof. But tonight, as fireworks ripped through the sky and her son fell into the sea, the man she swore she would never forgive was the only one to jump in and save him. And when their eyes met beneath the cold water, they both knew the truth was more dangerous than any lie they had ever believed. If you love stories about love, betrayal, and the power of family, like now and comment the city you're watching in, so I know how far my story has progressed. Stay tuned, because the ending will keep you glued to the screen. The fireworks started at 9, same as every year, and the whole Gulf Coast lit up like something out of a dream nobody asked for. Lena Hartwell stood behind the check-in counter of the Harborview Inn and watched the sky explode in red and gold through the lobby's floor-to-ceiling windows. She had her manager's smile on, the one she'd perfected over 8 years of learning to look unbothered when everything underneath was still raw and crooked and wrong. Guests streamed through the front entrance trailing sand and sunscreen and the bright, uncomplicated joy of people who had nowhere to be in the morning. She handed out room keys and answered the same questions she answered every 4th of July and did not look too long at the families, the fathers lifting children onto their shoulders, the easy way a man's hand found the small of a woman's back without either of them thinking about it. She'd stopped letting herself feel that particular ache around the time Noah turned 3. Or she'd tried to. The ache didn't care much about her timetable. "Mom." Noah appeared from behind the counter wearing his swim trunks and a grin that could have powered the whole strand of lanterns strung across the dock. "The fireworks platform is right out front. Marcus said we can watch from the south end of the dock and see everything." Marcus was 17, the son of her head housekeeper, and he'd appointed himself Noah's unofficial big brother sometime around last summer. Lena didn't mind. Noah needed that. She couldn't be everything all the time, and she'd stopped pretending she could about the same time she stopped pretending the ache would go away. "Stay on the dock," she said. "Don't lean over the railing, and if Marcus lets you anywhere near the edge—" I know. He was already gone. She watched him disappear through the side door, all 8 years of him, elbows and determination, and that stubborn set to his jaw that had nothing to do with her and everything to do with a man she hadn't let herself think about in years. She turned back to the counter. The lobby smelled like salt air and the coconut sunscreen half her guests bathed in. The ceiling fans turned slow overhead. Through the window, the bay glittered under the early fireworks. Test bursts, the big show still building. Lena pulled up the reservation queue on her tablet and tried to care about the Hendersons in 14B who'd called twice about a malfunctioning ice machine. She was 4 steps toward the maintenance closet when she heard the crack. Not a firework. A crack with weight behind it, structural, wrong, followed immediately by shouting from the direction of the dock. She was outside before she'd made the decision to move. The fireworks platform was a floating barge moored 30 yards off the south dock, same spot every year, rigged with the town's annual display. What nobody had apparently noticed, or what somebody hadn't bothered to flag, was that the western support bracket had been corroding under the waterline since the previous winter. Later, the investigation would turn up maintenance logs that had been falsified, signed off on by a harbor master who'd taken money from a rival event company to quietly let the thing deteriorate. But that was later. Right now, in the dark and the noise and the smell of gunpowder already thick in the air, what Lena saw was the platform tilting hard to port and the crowd on the south dock lurching backward in a single terrified mass. She saw Noah at the railing. She saw Marcus grab for him and miss. She saw her son go over. The scream that came out of her didn't sound like her. She was running before it finished leaving her throat, shouldering past tourists frozen with their phones up, already filming, already documenting the disaster rather than moving out of the way of it. The dock was maybe 40 feet. It felt like 40 miles. She hit the railing where Noah had gone over and looked down at black water churning with the wake from people who'd jumped in trying to help, or people who'd fallen trying to get away. She couldn't tell which. "Noah!" Her voice cracked on his name. "Noah!" She couldn't see him. The water was dark and the lantern lights swayed and the fireworks were still going overhead because nobody had told the crew to stop yet, and the whole scene was strobe lit and disorienting and wrong. She had one leg over the railing when the man surfaced. He came up fast, one arm cutting through the chop, the other arm locked around a small body. Noah. Coughing, alive, furious in the way kids get when they're terrified and won't show it, already trying to push away from the arm holding him, already saying something that got lost under the noise. The man didn't let go. He got Noah to the dock ladder in 4 strong strokes and held him there while someone above hauled the boy up onto the planks. Lena grabbed Noah the moment he cleared the railing. She dropped to her knees on the wet dock and pressed her hands over him. His face, his shoulders, his chest, cataloging him. Breathing, coughing up salt water, but breathing. A scrape on his forearm from the platform edge, nothing that needed stitches. He was shaking, but he was here and whole, and she had to fight the urge to shake him herself for standing so close to the railing, for being 8 and reckless and exactly like, "He's all right." The voice came from the water. She looked up. The man was still in the harbor, treading water with his forearms on the ladder's bottom rung. He was big. She registered that first, the way she registered the voice, as something physical, something her nervous system responded to before her brain had the chance to intervene. Dark hair plastered flat, a dress shirt soaked to transparency, eyes that caught the light from the lanterns above and held it in a way that made the breath stall somewhere between her lungs and her mouth. She knew those eyes. She'd spent 3 years trying to forget them and 5 more years telling herself she had. He swallowed some water, Dominic Vale said, but his airways are clear. He's going to be fine. He said it the way he'd always said difficult things. Flat, matter of fact, no warmth in the words themselves, but something underneath them that was nothing but. His gaze moved from Noah to her face and stayed there. And in the half second before she remembered who he was and what he'd done, something in her chest cracked open in a way that had nothing to do with the broken platform or the chaos or the cold air off the water. Then the next firework went up, white and blinding, and she saw his face clearly for the first time in 9 years, and the warmth in her chest curdled into something harder and older and far more durable. She stood up, pulling Noah against her side. "Thank you," she said. 2 words. Nothing more. She turned and walked her son back toward the inn without looking back. And she didn't look back. And she told herself she was glad she didn't. Noah was fine. The inn's on-call first aid coordinator, a retired ER nurse named Dolores who worked summers at the front desk and kept a kit that could have restocked a small clinic, checked him over in the lobby while Lena stood with her arms folded and her teeth grinding and her face arranged into something she hoped looked like calm. Salt water, mild shock, a bruised elbow. Dolores wanted him to rest. Noah wanted to know if the fireworks show was still going. "Bed," Lena said. "But bed, Noah." He went because he knew that particular tone. It wasn't the firm but negotiable one she used when he pushed curfew. It was the other one, the one with bedrock under it. Marcus appeared at her elbow, pale and wrecked. "I'm so sorry. I tried to grab him." "I know." She put a hand briefly on his arm. "It's not your fault. Go find your mom." Alone at the counter, she poured herself 3 fingers of the bourbon she kept in the maintenance closet for the nights that called for it, and stood in her quiet lobby and listened to the last of the fireworks die out over the water. Dominic Vale. She hadn't said his name out loud in years. She'd learned to cut the thought off at the root. A mental habit, like not touching a scar you know will reopen. But the way his voice had sounded from the water, low and certain, saying he's going to be fine like he had the right to make that call, it reached into the space where she'd buried all of it and pulled. She drank the bourbon and went to check on her son. He came to the inn the next morning. She was at the front desk when she saw him coming up the boardwalk, and for 1 full second she stood there with a room key in her hand and did nothing. He looked different in daylight and dry clothes. Better than she wanted him to, which was exactly the problem. He'd filled out since she'd known him, 22 and reckless, and full of plans that had nothing to do with the life he'd actually been born into. He moved the same way, though, like a man who'd made decisions about every room before he entered it. He stopped at the entrance. "Lena?" "We're at capacity," she said. "I'm not looking for a room." "Then we're closed for walk-ins." He pushed the door open anyway and came inside, and she hated that she didn't have it in her to call security on the man who'd pulled her son out of the harbor 12 hours ago. He stopped 6 feet from the counter, close enough to talk, far enough to give her room to breathe. She gave him credit for that much. How is he? He's fine. He's eating breakfast and arguing about cartoons. Something shifted in his face. She didn't let herself read it. I need to explain. You don't. She set the key down carefully. You saved my son's life. I'm grateful. That's the entire scope of what's happening here. Lena, Mr. Vale. She made herself use the name, made herself put the distance in it. I have 23 rooms occupied and a platform collapsed to coordinate with the harbor master's office and a maintenance contractor I have to yell at before noon. Whatever you need to say, I'm asking you not to say it. He looked at her for a long moment. She'd spent 9 years becoming someone who didn't look away first, and she didn't look away now. Okay, he said. I won't. He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket, clean, expensive, nothing showy, and set a business card on the counter between them. If you change your mind, he left. She stood there for a count of 10 before she picked up the card and turned it over. A phone number, no name, no title. She put it in the drawer under the counter and told herself she was going to throw it away. Noah found the man on the fishing dock at 7:15 the next morning. Lena discovered this because she came down to bring Noah his inhaler. The salt air always kicked up his mild asthma, and she'd learned not to let him be outside too long without it, and found her son sitting on an overturned bucket next to a grown man who was untangling a length of fishing line with the focused patience of someone who had nowhere else to be and no particular interest in hurrying. She stopped at the top of the dock stairs. And then Marcus tried to grab me, but he missed, Noah was saying, and I went in and it was really cold, but I wasn't that scared. No? Dominic didn't look up from the line. I mean, maybe a little. That's good, Dominic said. Being a little scared means your brain's working right. It's the people who aren't scared at all you have to watch out for. Noah considered this with the gravity of someone taking in genuinely new information. My mom says that too. Kind of. She says not being scared of anything means you haven't been paying attention. She's right. Lena stood at the top of the stairs and watched her son talk to a man he'd never met and felt something cold and exact settle in her stomach. Not just the sight of them. The easy way they sat, the way Noah leaned forward with his elbows on his knees in that posture she'd been correcting for years, the way Dominic handed him the end of the untangled line without making a production of it. It was something more specific, a quality in the air, the shape of a conversation that fit together too naturally for strangers. She came down the stairs. Noah spotted her first. Mom, we're fishing. I see that, she kept her voice even. Noah, go eat breakfast. Go eat again. Noah looked between them with the uncanny perception of children raised around adult tension, decided this wasn't his battle, gathered his dignity, and went. She waited until his footsteps faded before she turned to Dominic. He'd stood when she came down, an automatic thing, the kind of courtesy that came from somewhere deep and old, not performance. He came and sat down, Dominic said. I didn't seek him out. I know how my son moves. I'm not accusing you. She stopped a few feet away, close enough that she didn't have to raise her voice. I'm asking you to leave. I can do that. He held the fishing rod across both palms like he was offering it back to the dock. But I want to ask you something first, and then I'll go and I won't come back until you reach out. I won't reach out. Then I'll go and I won't come back. He met her eyes. Just one question. She breathed in through her nose, salt and low tide, and the particular quiet of the Gulf at this hour. Ask. Did you ever think... He stopped, started again, differently. The letters you got, the ones that said I'd married someone else. Did you ever, even once, wonder if they were real? The cold thing in her stomach spread. I read them, she said. I had them authenticated. I know. His voice was careful, precise, like someone placing their feet on uncertain ground. I know what they said. I'm not asking if you believe them. I'm asking if you ever wondered." She looked at him for a long time. The dock groaned under the light push of the tide. A pelican landed at the far end and regarded them both with ancient, unimpressed eyes. "Yes," she said. "Once." He nodded. Like that was the only thing he'd needed. Like he'd been holding his breath for the last 9 years, waiting for someone to say it. "Thank you," he said. He set the fishing rod against the dock railing and walked back up the stairs to the boardwalk and disappeared. And he didn't look back. And this time she was the one standing still while he left. She didn't sleep that night. She told herself it was the platform collapse paperwork. And there was genuinely a lot of it. The harbor master's office had been characteristically useless, and she'd had to draft 2 formal incident reports and field a call from the town's insurance liaison and one from a reporter at the local paper who she'd stonewalled politely but completely. She sat at the kitchen table in the apartment above the inn's office and went through it all and drank too much coffee and told herself that was why she was awake at 2 in the morning with the ceiling fan clicking overhead and the drawer where she'd put the business card sitting 15 feet away. She didn't look at the card. She thought about the letters instead. There had been 3 of them. Thick cream envelopes, typed, forwarded through a mutual contact she'd trusted at the time. The first described the engagement. A political marriage, the letter said, necessary for the succession of the Vale organization, brokered between Dominic and the daughter of a Chicago crime family. The second described the wedding. The third, written in a hand she'd recognized as Dominic's, or close enough that she'd never questioned it, said simply that it was done, that she should move on, that what they'd had wasn't strong enough to survive what he was. She'd read that last one so many times the paper had softened along the fold lines. She'd kept it anyway. She'd never examined why. Did you ever wonder if they were real? She'd had them authenticated. A document examiner she'd paid out of her own pocket the month after Noah was born, when the grief had finally gone quiet enough for the anger to speak clearly. Authentic signatures, authentic paper stock, authentic in every technical sense the examiner could identify. But authentication wasn't the same as truth. She knew that now in a way she hadn't known it at 22. She'd spent 8 years in hospitality management, which was largely the art of discerning what people were actually asking for underneath what they claimed to need. She knew how capable people were of manufacturing reality when the stakes were high enough. She got up at 2:30 and took the business card out of the drawer. She didn't call the number. She set the card on the kitchen table next to her coffee and looked at it until 4 a.m., when Noah's alarm went off in the next room, and she put it back in the drawer and started another pot of coffee and made his breakfast and let the morning take over, the way mornings always did, the way she'd relied on them to do for years. The next 48 hours passed like ordinary life arranged over a fault line. She ran the inn. She handled the insurance coordinator, the maintenance contractor, the harbor master's revised incident timeline. She went to Noah's swim lesson Saturday morning and watched him from the bleachers with the other parents and thought about nothing in particular. She had dinner with her friend Carla, who managed the Marina restaurant 2 piers down, and said nothing about Dominic Vale because there was nothing to say, and also because she didn't know how to begin. On Sunday, Noah asked why the man from the dock had been looking at him. Lena's hands went still on the dish she was drying. "What do you mean?" "Yesterday, when I was at the arcade with Marcus, the man from the fishing dock was across the street, and he was watching me." Noah delivered this without particular alarm. He was 8, not entirely aware of the categories that should concern him. I waved. He didn't wave back. He left. She set the dish down carefully. "Did he come near you?" "No, he was just there." Noah shrugged. "He looked, I don't know, sad, I guess." She waited until Noah was in bed that night. Then she took the business card out of the drawer and stood at the kitchen window for a long time, looking at the dark water beyond the boardwalk and the lights of the fishing vessels moving slow and far out. She dialed the number. He picked up on the second ring. "I need to know," she said without preamble. "Not for me, for him. If there's something happening that puts him in any kind of... If he's near whatever your life actually is, I need to know." A pause. Not hesitation. She'd heard Dominic hesitate when they were young, and it had never sounded like this. This sounded like a man choosing each word the way you'd choose footing on broken ground. "There's a lot I have to show you," he said. "It's not a conversation, it's evidence." Then bring the evidence. Tomorrow morning? She looked at the dark water. 7, she said, before Noah wakes up. She hung up and stood there in the kitchen with the card in her hand and her heart doing something complicated in her chest. And she told herself what she always told herself when she was about to do something irreversible. She told herself she was doing it for Noah. She told herself that was the whole of it. It almost worked. He arrived at 6:55 carrying a canvas bag and 2 coffees from the place 3 blocks up that opened at 6. She took the coffee because she'd already finished her own pot, and her hands needed something to hold. She led him through the back office and into the narrow room she used as a filing space. No sentiment in it, no softness, just banker's boxes and a folding table. And she stood with her coffee and her back against the far wall and watched him open the bag. Financial documents first, printouts of wire transfers, spreadsheets, ledger photographs going back 11 years. He walked her through them methodically, not selling her on anything, just laying it out the way a man lays evidence before a jury and then steps back from it. She asked 3 questions. He answered each one without deflection. Then the communications log. 46 documented attempts by Dominic to contact her through third parties, intermediaries, or direct channels between the year she'd left and the year Noah turned 5. Each one blocked, each one intercepted. The routing signatures on the blocks were consistent, a single source coordinating the cutoff across every channel. Victor Vale, Dominic's first cousin, his father's heir presumptive, in the years before Dominic's father had formally named Dominic his successor. She read the name 3 times. And the letters, she said. He pulled out the last document. A forensic analysis set, not the one she'd commissioned, a different one, more recent, showing that while the signatures on the first 2 letters were expertly forged, the third letter, the one in her hand, was composed on a typewriter that could be traced through its mechanical idiosyncrasies to a machine documented in a Vale family property inventory. Not Dominic's typewriter. Victor's. She set down the coffee. The room was very quiet. The ceiling fan in the outer office clicked the same click it always clicked, steady and minor and indifferent to everything happening 4 feet away from it. How long have you known? She said. 6 months? His voice was even. I started looking into it because I was trying to find you. I had a private investigator locate you 8 months ago. When I started reconstructing why I'd never been able to reach you, it started coming apart. You should have come then. I know. Why didn't you? He looked at her directly. Because I didn't know about Noah yet, and I was afraid if I came with half the truth it would close the door on the rest of it. She absorbed that. Did you know? She asked. Before the platform, before the harbor. Did you know he was yours? The silence before he answered was the longest of the morning. I suspected, he said, from the dates, from what I knew about where you were when we... He stopped. I hadn't confirmed it. I didn't want to confirm it through a private investigator. That felt wrong. She looked at the document spread across the folding table. 11 years of manufactured absence, the forensic shadow of a man she'd never met who had decided, for reasons she was only beginning to understand, that she and Dominic should never find their way back to each other. He knows you're here, she said. It wasn't a question. Dominic's jaw tightened, just slightly. Probably. She looked up at him. What does that mean for Noah? And in the half second before he answered, in the particular way his eyes moved to the door and back, the way his shoulders settled into something that looked like stillness but was closer to readiness, she understood that the conversation she'd thought was about the past was actually about right now. About tomorrow. About what was already in motion before she'd ever dialed that number. It means, Dominic said carefully, that we don't have as much time as I thought we did. From somewhere above them, Noah's alarm went off. 6:58, 2 minutes early, same as every morning, because he'd inherited her habit of setting it wrong and never fixing it. The cheerful electronic beep of a child beginning an ordinary summer day in a town where, as of this morning, he was no longer entirely safe. Lena's hand closed around the edge of the folding table. Start from the beginning, she said. Tell me everything. And don't leave anything out because you think I can't handle it. He looked at her. Really looked at her. The same way he had from the water 3 nights ago before she'd remembered to be hard. And she saw something shift behind his eyes. something that looked less like the Dominic she'd tried to forget and more like the one she'd actually known. Victor wants control of everything my father built, he began. He's wanted it for 20 years. The letters were just the opening move. Above them, she heard Noah's feet hit the floor. Noah took 11 minutes to shower, dress, and come downstairs. And in those 11 minutes, Lena did not move from the folding table, and Dominic did not stop talking. He laid it out in the order it had happened, not the order that made him look best, and she gave him credit for that even as each piece of it landed in her chest like something thrown hard. The Vale organization had been his father's creation, Marcus Vale Sr., who had built a criminal infrastructure spanning 6 southeastern states over 4 decades, who had died of a stroke 3 years ago and left the whole machinery of it to his only son. Dominic had known what he was inheriting. He'd known since he was 14, and his father had sat him down in the study of their Savannah estate and explained with the calm precision of a man describing a business rather than a criminal enterprise exactly what the family did and why it was necessary and what Dominic's role in it would be. What his father had apparently not explained, what Victor had made certain of, was that the organization's second-in-command had spent 20 years quietly repositioning himself, cultivating loyalties, identifying the people whose allegiance could be bought or pressured away from Dominic and toward himself, building, in parallel to the existing hierarchy, a shadow structure that was ready to step into place the moment the transition happened. The letters to Lena were part of it, not because Victor had any particular feeling about her. She wasn't even a variable in his calculations, Dominic said, which was almost worse, but because a man with a woman he loved was a man with a vulnerability, and Victor Vale had made a long career of identifying vulnerabilities and filling them with concrete. He forged the marriage, Dominic said. There was no engagement, no ceremony. He staged the documentation, staged the photographs, arranged the whole thing through a woman he was actually paying to play a role, and then he made sure the evidence reached you in a way that would feel verified. He paused. The woman's name was Caroline Marsh. She died in a car accident 2 years ago. I don't know if that was Victor or coincidence. I've stopped assuming coincidence. Lena looked at the photograph Dominic had included in the documents, a woman she'd spent 9 years imagining in visceral and specific detail, and who turned out to be a stranger with frightened eyes and a smile that didn't reach them. You could have found out about the forgery sooner, she said, if you'd looked. Yes. Why didn't you? He was quiet for a moment, not evasive, thinking. Because part of me believed you'd left willingly, he said. Not because of the letters, because of what I was, because of what you knew about the family even then. It was easier to believe you'd made a reasonable choice than to believe. He stopped. I was 23. I wasn't looking for evidence of a conspiracy. I was just trying to decide whether I could blame you for going. The honesty of it hit her somewhere unexpected. She didn't let her face show it. What does Victor want now? She said. Specifically, not the history. The same thing he's always wanted, complete control of the organization, which he effectively has since I've spent the last 4 years dismantling it. He said that last part simply, without theater, and she looked at him sharply. Dismantling it how? Quietly. Financial redirection. Withdrawing infrastructure. Cutting supply chains. Not burning it down. That gets people killed. Dismantling it the way you take apart a machine piece by piece until it stops running. He met her eyes. I've been doing it since the year my father died. It's why Victor's been accelerating his own moves. He knows the window is closing. She absorbed this. And where does Noah factor into this? Dominic's jaw tightened again. Same micro-movement. She'd already learned to read it. The organization has a succession doctrine, he said. It's a formal document drawn up by my grandfather, updated by my father. It specifies that leadership passes to the eldest legitimate descendant of the Vale line. Victor has no children. I had no documented children. He paused. Until now. She understood before he finished the sentence. If Noah's existence becomes known, then Victor has a problem, Dominic said. A 9-year-old problem. The doctrine doesn't distinguish between a father who's active in the organization and one who isn't. Blood is blood as far as the document is concerned. Noah would have a claim that supersedes Victor's entirely. The ceiling fan clicked. The inn was waking up around them. She could hear the first guests moving through the hallways above, the distant sound of the lobby door, the particular creak of the third step on the back staircase that she'd been meaning to fix since March. "He doesn't know about Noah," she said. "I don't think so, not yet." "But he will. He has people watching me, has had, probably since I came to Harborview. It's a matter of time before someone runs a background on you and starts looking at dates." She set both hands flat on the table, felt the cold surface of it, the slight roughness where the laminate had bubbled at one corner, grounding herself. "Then what's your plan?" she said. "I have federal contacts. I've been building a case for 4 years. If I hand them what I have, all of it, the finances, the operations, the structure, they can move on Victor before he moves on us." Before. That's the part I can't guarantee. The back staircase creaked. Noah appeared in the doorway wearing his swim team shirt and mismatched socks, his hair still damp, holding a granola bar like it had personally offended him. He looked at Dominic. He looked at his mother. He had the expression children get when they can tell the adult situation in the room is serious and they're deciding whether to ask about it or pretend they haven't noticed. He decided to pretend. "Is there actual breakfast or just granola bars?" "Eggs," Lena said. "Give me 5 minutes." Noah withdrew. His footsteps receded toward the small kitchen off the apartment's main room. She straightened up. "You're not staying in Harborview. I have a room at the Pelican on the north end." "That's too close." "I know." He didn't move to argue it. "I'll go. But I need you to take this seriously, Lena. Not because of what we were, because of what's actually coming." She looked at him. "I have been taking it seriously," she said. "Since the moment you told me my son might be a target. That's the only thing I'm taking seriously. Don't make it about anything else." He held her gaze, nodded once. "I'll be in touch today," he said. "Stay in public spaces. Keep Noah visible. If anything feels off, I know how to protect my son." Her voice came out harder than she intended. She didn't soften it. He picked up the canvas bag and left through the back office door. She stood alone in the filing room for 20 seconds, looking at the documents still spread across the folding table. And then she straightened them into a neat stack, put them in the bottom of the banker's box she used for prior year tax records, and went to make her son breakfast. The eggs were scrambled because Noah claimed he couldn't taste the difference between good scrambled eggs and bad ones, which wasn't true, but was the kind of thing 8-year-olds said to make their mothers feel better. She made them anyway and stood at the counter while he ate and watched the morning light move across the water through the kitchen window and thought about every decision she'd made in the last 9 years that had led to this particular Tuesday. "You know that man from the dock?" Noah said, without looking up from his eggs. Her hands went still. "What about him?" "He has the same thing on his wrist as me." Noah held up his left arm, the inside of his wrist. A small dark mark, irregular, roughly the shape of a crescent moon if you were charitable about it. She'd told Noah it was a birthmark. She'd been telling herself the same thing for 8 years. She had in fact been telling herself it was a coincidence for 8 years. The same way she told herself his jaw was her father's jaw, not someone else's, and that the way he set his shoulders when he was mad had nothing to do with anyone. "Lots of people have birthmarks," she said. "I know." Noah scraped the last of the eggs. "I'm just saying." She took his plate. She rinsed it. She stared at the water coming out of the faucet and thought about all the ways the last 9 years could have been different, and then she turned off the faucet and turned off that line of thinking because it led nowhere she could afford to go right now. "Swim practice is at 10, she said. "Marcus is picking you up." "Can the man from the dock come watch?" "No." Noah accepted this with the equanimity of someone who'd learned not to push the one-word answers. He went to get his swim bag. She stood at the kitchen sink and breathed. The call came at 11:15. She was in the lobby handling a checkout when her cell buzzed with a number she didn't recognize. Not Dominic's number, a different one, local area code. She stepped behind the counter and answered it with her professional voice out of reflex. "Ms. Hartwell." The voice on the other end was smooth, older. The voice of a man who'd spent decades making difficult calls and had ironed all the difficulty out of it. "My name is Victor Vale. I believe you may know that name." She gripped the phone, said nothing. "I'll take your silence as a yes." A pause that managed to sound comfortable. "I'm calling because I'm a great believer in direct conversation. Intermediaries create confusion. I'd hate for you to be confused about your situation." "I'm not confused," she said. "Good. That's very good." The warmth in his voice was precise and deployed like a tool. "Then I'll be direct. My cousin has apparently decided to involve you in a matter that is genuinely none of your concern. Whatever he's told you about me, about the family business, about letters, about conspiracies, I'd ask you to consider the source." "I've considered it." "He's a man with a great deal to answer for," Victor said. "Years of mismanagement, decisions that hurt a lot of people who trusted the Vale name. He's looking for someone to blame, and he's very good at making himself the victim of a story. He's had practice." Another pause. "I understand you have a son." The lobby felt very still. The ceiling fans turned. The front desk computer made its small routine noise. "Don't," she said. "I'm not threatening anyone, Ms. Hartwell. I want to be very clear about that. I'm a businessman. Threats are inefficient." The smooth voice stayed smooth. "I'm simply observing that single mothers in coastal Florida have a lot to manage. An inn to run, a child in swim programs, a life that functions, from what I can tell, quite well, as long as nobody disrupts it." She made herself breathe evenly. "What do you want?" she said. "I want you to have a conversation with my cousin. Ask him why he came to Harborview specifically. Ask him what he intends to do with whatever relationship he's developing with your son. Ask him whose interests he's actually serving." A brief silence. "Then I'd ask you to call me back at this number. Just a conversation. That's all." He hung up. She stood at the front desk for the count of 30, the phone still at her ear, listening to nothing. Then she called Dominic. He picked up on the first ring this time. "Victor called me," she said. The silence on his end was different from any silence she'd heard from him yet. Compressed, dangerous in the specific way that quiet gets before a significant weather event. "When?" he said. 11 minutes ago. "He has this number. He knows Noah's in swim programs. He knows the inn." She kept her voice level. "He said to ask you why you came here specifically." "Because I tracked you here. I told you that." "He said to ask what you intend to do about Noah. Protect him." "He said to ask whose interests you're serving." Dominic was quiet for 2 seconds. "Mine and yours and Noah's, in that order." She walked to the window. The boardwalk was ordinary. Tourists, a couple with a stroller, an older man with a fishing hat. Ordinary Tuesday morning. "He's watching the inn," she said. "I know. I've had a man on the north approach since yesterday." "You had someone watching my property without telling me?" "Yes." "That's not—" She stopped. She didn't have the luxury of the argument she wanted to have. "I need to know everything that's happening. Everything. I'm not a variable you manage. I'm the person whose life this is." "You're right." No deflection, no qualification. "I should have told you." "Yes, you should have." She pulled the phone from her ear for a moment, breathed, put it back. "What do we do?" "I'm moving up the timeline on the federal contact. I was going to wait for 2 more pieces of documentation. I'm not waiting." "How long?" "If they move fast, 48 hours before agents are in position. And in the meantime, Noah doesn't go anywhere without you or someone I trust. The inn stays normally staffed. I don't want Victor seeing a change in pattern. And you don't call him back." "I wasn't going to call him back." "Good." A pause. "Lena, he called because he's trying to figure out how much you know. The fact that he called directly means he's not certain yet. That's a window." "How small?" "Small enough," he said, "that we can't afford to waste it arguing about what I should have told you sooner." She stood at the window with the ordinary boardwalk in front of her, and the phone warm against her palm, and her whole life arranged around her like furniture that had been moved 2 inches while she wasn't looking. The same shapes, the same room, but nothing quite where her hands expected it to be. "Tonight," she said, "come to the inn after close. We're going to sit down and you're going to tell me exactly what the federal situation is. Names, contacts, what they have, what they need, All of it. 9 o'clock? 9. She hung up and went back to her desk and handled the rest of the checkout and answered 3 emails and called the platform repair contractor and did everything she was supposed to do. And the whole time, one part of her brain was running a separate and continuous calculation about exits, sightlines, and the fastest route from the inn's south door to Noah's swim facility. Carla came by at 3. She did this sometimes on slow Tuesdays, walked over from the Marina restaurant with 2 iced teas and the particular expression of someone who'd been watching their friend's face and had questions. Lena met her at the side patio because the lobby had 2 guests in it reading and she wanted the open air. "You look terrible," Carla said, handing her a tea. "Thank you." Not like tired terrible, like something is wrong terrible. Carla sat across from her and crossed her arms on the table. She was 41, practical, with the direct gaze of someone who'd spent 15 years working kitchens before moving into management. "Is this about the platform collapse? Because Rodrigo at the harbor master's office is a known idiot and everyone in town knows it. It's not about the platform. Is it about the man who pulled Noah out of the water?" Lena looked at her. "Half the doc saw it," Carla said, unapologetic. Rashida from the gift shop said he looked like he knew Noah, the way he moved to him. "He didn't know Noah. But you know him." A pelican crossed the sky above the patio, the same one maybe from the fishing dock. She had no way to tell. "I knew him a long time ago," Lena said. Carla waited. She was good at that. The particular patience of someone who knew the difference between a person who needed time and a person who needed to be asked directly. "He's Noah's father," Lena said. The patio was quiet. "Okay," Carla said after a moment. "Okay. Does he know?" "He does now." "Does Noah know?" "No." Carla looked at her iced tea, looked at Lena. "What kind of man is he?" Lena thought about the documents on the folding table, the 46 blocked contact attempts, the forensic report on the typewriter, the way he'd said his airways are clear from the dark water with her son in his arms. "The complicated kind," she said. Carla didn't push. That was why they were friends. Dolores caught her at the front desk at 4:30. The retired ER nurse had a look on her face that Lena recognized. The particular alertness of someone trained to notice when a person's baseline has shifted without obvious cause. "The man who pulled Noah out," Dolores said, without preamble. "He came by today." Lena's spine went straight. "What?" "Around 2, while you were on the phone with the contractor. He didn't come inside. He was on the boardwalk, but he was watching the inn." She paused. "The thing is, there was another man on the south side. He was watching the first man." Lena turned this over. What did the second man look like? Older, heavier, collared shirt. He had a phone out, but he wasn't looking at it. Dolores's voice was careful, precise. The voice of a woman who'd done triage for 30 years and knew how to separate the relevant from the noise. "I don't know what's going on, Lena, and you don't have to tell me, but I think you should know there's more than one person paying attention to this building." She thought about Dominic's words. "I've had a man on the north approach since yesterday. North, not south. Can you pull the exterior camera footage from this afternoon?" she said. "I already did," Dolores said, and put a printed screenshot on the desk. The man on the south side of the boardwalk was heavy-set, 60s, a collared shirt the color of old concrete. He was angled toward the inn, but his face was turned just enough that the camera had caught only his profile. It wasn't Victor. She didn't know who it was. She photographed the printout with her phone and texted it to Dominic's number. His response came in 40 seconds. "Not one of mine. Get Noah from swim practice yourself. Don't send Marcus." She was already reaching for her keys. Batichet. The swim facility was 6 blocks from the inn, a covered outdoor pool attached to the community center. She made it in 4 minutes and stood at the chain-link fence watching the practice session until she spotted Noah in the far lane, arms churning, absolutely committed to the stroke in the way he committed to everything, total and slightly reckless. She let out a breath she hadn't known she was holding. She texted Marcus to let him know she'd handle pickup. He sent back a thumbs up. She waited at the fence. The sun was dropping toward the water, and the shadows from the palms at the pool's edge were going long and warm. Other parents were arriving for the end of practice pickup. She recognized most of them, Harborview was a small enough town that the parents at swim practice all knew each other at least by face. She nodded at the ones who caught her eye, maintained the surface. Noah came out of the pool shaking water from his ears and spotted her immediately. His face changed. Not alarm, just recalibration. She was never here. Pickups were always Marcus. He came through the gate pulling his towel around his shoulders. "What's wrong?" "Nothing. I had a slow afternoon." He looked at her. He had Dominic's eyes. She didn't know why she'd kept pretending otherwise. "You're a bad liar," Noah said. "Excuse me?" "You get this thing." He pointed at the corner of her eye. "Right there. When you're trying to be calm, but you're not." She looked at her 8-year-old son, who had apparently been studying her face with the systematic attention she'd apparently inherited from no one. "Get your bag," she said. He got his bag. She put her hand on his shoulder as they walked and kept it there and didn't move it for the entire 6 blocks home. 9 o'clock. The lobby was quiet. The 2 late-reading guests had gone upstairs. Dolores was on the overnight desk. Noah was asleep. She'd checked twice. Dominic came through the back door the way she'd told him to, the one that opened off the parking strip behind the building. He looked like he hadn't slept. She doubted she looked different. She poured 2 cups of the evening coffee, weaker, the night blend, and set one in front of him at the office table and sat across from it. "The man on the South Boardwalk," he said. "You know him?" "His name is Garrett Moss. He works for a private security contractor that Victor has used for at least 6 years. He wrapped both hands around the mug. He wasn't there to hurt anyone. He was there to gather information, confirm you and Noah, confirm the inn's layout, confirm my presence. So Victor knows. Victor knows enough. He doesn't know about the federal contact. If he did, we'd have seen a different kind of response by now." She looked at him. "What does a different kind of response look like?" He didn't answer that immediately, which was its own kind of answer. "The federal agent I've been working with is a woman named Harker," he said. "She's been building a RICO case against the Vail organization for 3 years. What I have accelerates her timeline by about 18 months. She wants to move. And she'll protect Noah. She'll protect all of us. That's the deal. What do you give her in return?" "Everything." He said it without drama. "Finance structures, personnel files, property holdings, active contracts, offshore accounts, 20 years of operations documentation. Everything my father built, opened up to federal examination." He looked at her directly. "It ends the organization. Victor goes to prison. Anyone who's been operating under the Vail name faces prosecution or cooperation agreements. The whole thing is done." She sat with that. "You'd be testifying against your own family," she said. "My family is in that room upstairs sleeping." The words landed simple and flat, and she felt them the way you feel something true. In the chest, not the head. "Victor isn't family. Victor is a man who stole 9 years from both of us because it was convenient. I'm not interested in protecting him." She turned her coffee cup in her hands. "When do you contact Harker?" "Tomorrow morning. First contact to position her team. 48 hours, maybe 60. And between now and then. We're careful. We're visible. We don't—" The back door opened. Not a knock. Not the sound of someone coming in normally. The distinct sound of a door pushed open by someone who hadn't bothered to announce themselves because announcing themselves wasn't part of the plan. Dominic was on his feet before she'd processed the sound. His chair went back hard. He was between her and the doorway in 2 steps, and she saw something in the way he moved that she'd never seen before. Not the man from the fishing dock, not the man who'd laid evidence on her folding table. Something older. Something that had been in him long before she'd known him and had apparently never entirely left. The man in the doorway was not Garrett Moss. He was younger, 30s, with close-cut hair and the flat eyes of someone performing a job. He held up both hands at shoulder height when he saw Dominic's posture. Not in surrender, in the gesture of a man demonstrating that he's choosing not to escalate for now. "Easy," the man said. "I'm a message." "From Victor," Dominic said. "Not a question." "From Mr. Vail, yes." The flat eyes moved briefly to Lena, then back to Dominic. "He wants a meeting, tomorrow. Neutral location, his choice, your terms for security. He says the matter with the federal contact." The man paused, and the pause did more damage than anything Victor could have scripted. should be discussed before anyone does anything they can't undo. The room was very still. He knows about Harker. The thought went through her like cold water. Not a suspicion, not a possibility. A certainty, immediate and absolute, in the way the worst things tend to arrive. Dominic's voice, when it came, was very quiet. Tell him no. The messenger nodded once, like he'd expected exactly that, and withdrew back through the door, and his footsteps crossed the parking strip and faded. And then there was nothing but the night air coming through the open door, and the sound of the ceiling fan, and the specific silence of a situation that had just changed its shape entirely. She looked at Dominic. He knows about Harker, she said. Yes. Which means he has someone inside the federal contact. Dominic's face was very controlled and very still in the way faces get when a person is running fast calculations behind an expression they've decided not to move. It means he has someone close enough to know the name. It doesn't mean he knows the full scope of what I've given her. Does it matter? Her voice came out steadier than she felt. If he knows you've been talking to federal investigators, he's not going to wait for you to finish. Whatever he was planning, whatever timeline he had, it just moved up. Dominic looked at the open back door. Then he looked at her. I need to call Harker tonight, he said. Right now. Then call her. She stood up. I'm going to check Noah's window locks. She was halfway to the door when his voice stopped her. Lena. He said it the way he'd said her name from the dark water, without calculation, without anything except the plain fact of her. I need you to know that whatever happens next, whatever I have to do, the only thing that matters is getting you and Noah out of this. She stopped in the doorway, didn't turn around. I know, she said. Make the call. She went upstairs and checked every window in the apartment and stood for a long time in the doorway of Noah's room, watching him sleep. One arm flung out, blanket kicked halfway off, completely undisturbed by the thing that had just shifted irrevocably one floor below him. She pulled the blanket back up over his shoulder. He didn't stir. She went to the kitchen window and looked at the dark parking strip below. Dominic was down there, phone to his ear, his back to the building, his free hand pressed flat against the wall beside him, the way a man presses against something solid when the ground under him has stopped being reliable. She watched him until he hung up. He stood there another moment without moving. Then he looked up. He couldn't see her through the dark glass. She knew that. But he looked up at the window anyway, the way people look toward something they can feel without seeing. And she stood in the dark kitchen of the life she'd built without him, and felt the full weight of the next 48 hours settle across her shoulders like weather coming in off the water. Her phone buzzed on the counter, a text from Dominic's number. Harker is moving tonight. Safe house by morning. Pack light. Tell Noah it's a trip. She set the phone down, picked it back up. She began to pack. She packed the way she cleaned after a bad season. Fast, methodical, no sentiment. 1 bag for Noah. Swim gear, 3 changes of clothes, the small, worn paperback he'd been reading for a month and would be furious to lose track of, his inhaler, a spare. 1 bag for herself. The essentials, the documents, the banker's box contents transferred to a waterproof folder she kept in the office for hurricane season. She'd been in Florida long enough to know that the things worth saving needed to be portable. Noah woke up when she turned on his light at 11:30. He sat up with the immediate alertness of a child who'd been sleeping lightly, which told her he'd known something was wrong before he'd gone to bed and had been waiting for the confirmation. Smart kid. Too smart sometimes. We're going somewhere, he said. Not a question. For a few days. There's a situation with the inn, a maintenance thing, and we need to be somewhere else while it gets handled. She handed him yesterday's jeans and the first shirt her hand found. Get dressed. He looked at her with those eyes. Is the man from the dock coming? Yes. He nodded and got dressed without another word, and she loved him so much in that moment it was almost unbearable. The uncomplicated trust of it, the willingness to follow her into the unknown without demanding more than she could give him right then. She zipped his bag and carried both bags down the back stairs. Dominic was at the bottom. He'd moved the car, a dark rental sedan she hadn't seen before, to the parking strip, backed in, engine off. He took the bags from her without being asked and put them in the trunk, and she noticed he'd changed clothes too. Dark, everything. The canvas bag was in the back seat, slimmer now, like some of its contents had been relocated. Parker has a location 40 minutes north, he said quietly. It's a maintained property. 2 agents on site by the time we arrive. What about the inn? Dolores knows you're taking an emergency family trip. I called Carla. She'll keep an eye on the building during the day. Nothing looks closed from the outside. She hadn't asked him to do either of those things. She noticed that he'd done them anyway and decided not to address it right now. Noah came down the stairs with his swim bag over one shoulder and his paperback in his hand, still in his socks. Dominic looked at him. Something moved through his face, there and gone, controlled with the same efficiency he applied to everything. But she saw it. She'd been watching his face for 3 days now, and she was starting to be able to read the things he didn't intend to show. You need shoes, Dominic said. I know, Noah said. I was going to get them. I brought them. He held up Noah's sneakers, the ones that had been by the back door. He'd noticed them on his way in. Noah looked at the shoes, looked at Dominic, took them without comment, sat on the bottom step, and put them on with the focused concentration of someone performing an important task. Dominic watched him tie them, and his hands were absolutely still at his sides. They were on the highway by midnight. The safe house was a low stucco structure set back from a county road behind a line of scrub palmettos, indistinguishable from the dozens of vacation rentals that dotted the coastline. 2 vehicles in the drive, lights on inside. Agent Harker met them at the door. She was 50s, compact, with short silver hair and the unhurried manner of someone who'd stopped being impressed by urgency years ago. She shook Lena's hand first, not Dominic's, and that told Lena something about her that she filed away. Ms. Hartwell. A pause that acknowledged everything without naming it. There's a room set up for your son in the back. It has a TV. Noah perked up. Lena had taken the television out of his room at the inn 2 years ago as part of a bedtime policy she was now prepared to quietly abandon. Go with Agent Harker, Lena told him. He went. Harker walked him down the hall, said something that made him produce a small, reluctant smile, and deposited him in the back room. When she returned to the main room where Lena and Dominic stood, the warmth she'd deployed for Noah's benefit had been replaced with something more efficient. We have a problem, she said. Dominic went still. How bad? The informant who tipped Vale about our contact. She moved to the table, where a laptop was open and a series of documents were spread across its surface. We identified him an hour ago. She turned one of the documents to face them. A personnel file. A photograph. Lena looked at the photograph. The name underneath it was Agent Daniel Cruz, Harker's own field coordinator. The man who had been handling the operational side of the RICO case for 2 years, who had been present at every substantive meeting between Harker and Dominic's intermediaries, who had access to every piece of documentation Dominic had provided. He's been feeding Vale's people a selective summary of our case progress for 14 months, Harker said. Her voice was flat and precise. Not everything. Enough to keep Victor informed of the timeline without compromising the case so badly it would shut down. He was managing the flow. She paused. He was also the one who confirmed your identity to Vale's surveillance team when you arrived in Harborview. That's how Victor knew you were there within 24 hours. Dominic absorbed this without moving. Where is Cruz now? In federal custody as of 2 hours ago. He won't be a problem going forward. Harker's jaw tightened. The problem is what he already gave them. Victor knows the case structure. He knows what we have and, more critically, what we're still missing. What are we missing? Lena said. Harker looked at her, then at Dominic. Tell her, Lena said. Dominic's voice, when it came, was measured in the way of a man controlling something that very much wanted not to be controlled. There's a ledger. Physical. My father kept a master record, handwritten, cross-referenced, everything going back to the organization's founding. Locations of assets, names of every judge and official who ever took money, complete operational history. It's the one piece of documentation that makes the case irrefutable, regardless of what any witness says or doesn't say. Where is it? She said. Savannah, my father's estate. The house has been in legal limbo since he died. I've been keeping the probate slow deliberately, to buy time. He met her eyes. Victor doesn't have it. I have it. But Cruz told him exactly why it matters and exactly where it is. Harker cut in. Which means Victor will move on the Savannah property within the next 12 to 18 hours. If he gets the ledger before we do, he controls what gets exposed and what doesn't. The entire case goes from ironclad to negotiable. The room was very quiet. Lena looked at Dominic. You have to go get it. Yes. Tonight. Yes. He looked at Harker. I need 2 agents and a vehicle, and I need Lena and Noah to stay here with full coverage until I'm back. I can give you 1 agent, Harker said. Cruz exposure means I have to assume 2 other members of the local team may be compromised until I've done full internal review. I'm not putting people in the field I can't verify. 1 agent and a vehicle. Yes. He nodded once. Looked at Lena. The look lasted about 2 seconds and communicated approximately 9 years' worth of things neither of them had the time or the right vocabulary to say. I'll be back by morning, he said. Don't make promises about timing, she said. Just go get it. He went. Tick. The safe house at 1 in the morning was the particular quiet of a place holding its breath. Lena sat at the table with a cup of coffee that had gone cold and Harker's documents spread in front of her. Not because Harker had invited her to read them, but because she'd started reading and Harker had looked at her for a moment and then not stopped her. There was a pragmatism to the woman that Lena respected. She didn't perform authority. She just exercised it when necessary and got out of the way the rest of the time. You've been working this case 3 years, Lena said. Almost 4. Harker sat across from her with her own coffee, working through something on the laptop. Since before Marcus Vale Sr. died. Did you know about the succession document, the bloodline clause? Harker looked up. We knew about it in the abstract, the family's internal governance structure. She paused. We didn't know about your son until Dominic told me tonight. Lena turned her coffee cup. Does it change the case? It changes Victor's urgency, which changes our timeline. Harker set down the laptop. Ms. Hartwell, I want to be direct with you about something. Please. Victor Vale is not going to stop. Not because of the ledger, not because of federal exposure, not because Dominic is willing to cooperate. He's been building toward this for 20 years, and he's made of the particular kind of ambition that doesn't recalculate when the odds change. It just looks for a different approach. She held Lena's gaze. The best outcome for you and your son requires Victor in a cell before he has time to change his approach again. And the ledger makes that possible. The ledger makes it inevitable. Without it, we have a strong case. With it, we have a case that no defense attorney on earth can argue around. She paused, which is why tonight matters more than Dominic may have conveyed. Lena looked at the cold coffee. He conveyed it fine. She sat with Harker in the breathing quiet of the safe house and listened to the palmetto branches move against the window screen and the distant sound of the television from the back room where Noah had apparently fallen asleep to whatever he'd found, because the voices had gone low and steady and stopped reacting. She must have slept in the chair because she woke to gray pre-dawn light and Harker's voice on the phone in the next room, low and urgent, and the immediate knowledge that something had changed. She was on her feet before she was fully awake. Harker came through the doorway. Her face was controlled, but her eyes were doing something different. Dominic reached the Savannah property. And? The ledger was gone. The floor felt very solid under Lena's feet. She focused on that. Victor got there first, she said. No. Harker's voice had something in it that Lena couldn't immediately identify. That's what we thought. But Dominic found the estate's property manager on site. The man had been there since yesterday afternoon. He said someone had come for the ledger the previous evening, someone with a key and the code to the security system. She stopped. Someone who knew exactly where it was kept. Who? Harker set a photograph on the table. Security camera still, time-stamped from 22 hours ago. A figure moving through the foyer of an old estate house carrying a flat document case. The figure's face was turned away, but the build was identifiable. The shoes were distinctive. Expensive, a specific style. Lena had seen those shoes, in the parking strip behind the Harborview Inn, on a man who'd stood outside her office door and told her Victor Vale wasn't a threat. Not Victor's man, not Cruz, not anyone she'd cataloged as the enemy. Dominic's voice came through Harker's phone, still in her hand, reaching the room without the speaker. He'd been talking when Harker walked in, and the call was still live. "Can't be right," he was saying. The flatness was gone from his voice. Something raw had taken its place. "Run it again." "It's been run 3 times," Harker said to the phone now. The shoe identification matched a purchase logged to a credit account we traced back to. "I know who it traces back to." His voice cracked on the last word. Barely, just at the edge of it. And that crack was the most frightening thing Lena had heard in 3 days. "I know who it is." She looked at Harker. "Tell me," she said. Harker looked at her for a long moment. Then she said, "The account belongs to a woman named Elena Voss. She's been on Dominic's personal staff for 6 years, his executive assistant and household coordinator for the Savannah estate." She paused. "She's also, according to financial records we pulled in the last hour, been receiving payments from a subsidiary of one of Victor's holding companies for the last 4 years. 4 years. The math arranged itself without her having to do it deliberately. Dominic had started dismantling the organization 4 years ago. Elena Voss had started taking Victor's money 4 years ago. Every move Dominic had made, every piece of documentation he'd assembled, every strategic decision, all of it filtered through a woman who sat 2 rooms away from his private files and had the codes to his estate and had apparently been waiting with the patience of a long-game player for the moment it would matter most. And last night, with the timing precision of someone who'd been told exactly when to move, she'd walked into the house and taken the one thing that couldn't be replaced. "Where is she now?" Lena said. "We don't know. She left the estate at 9:47 last night. Her phone went dark at 10:15. Her car was found at a park and ride outside Savannah at 11. Parker's voice was careful and very even. "She had a 4-hour head start before we knew to look. And the ledger is wherever she is, which means it's wherever Victor directed her to take it." The pre-dawn light in the safe house was gray and flat and indifferent. From the back room, Lena could hear the slow rhythm of Noah's breathing through the half-open door. She fixed on that. The sound of him, steady and unaware, the anchor of it. "What does Victor do with it?" she said. "If he has the ledger and he knows the case structure, what does he actually do?" Harker sat down. "Best case, he uses it as leverage to negotiate terms, exchanges cooperation for immunity, controls the exposure, minimizes what actually reaches prosecution, comes out with reduced liability, and probably retains enough of the organization's infrastructure to rebuild over 5 years. Worst case. He destroys it and dares us to convict on testimony alone, which is prosecutable but survivable for a man with his resources. Then he spends those resources making sure the witnesses don't hold." She didn't elaborate on what that meant. She didn't need to. The phone in Harker's hand, still live, still connected to Dominic and Savannah, was silent for a long moment. Then his voice came through again, and this time it was very quiet and very controlled, which was somehow worse than the crack. "I need to know if Elena had access to the federal safe house locations." Harker closed her eyes for exactly 1 second. "She had access to my correspondence with your intermediaries," she said. "Answer the question." "Yes," Harker said. "She had access." Lena understood before the sentence was finished. She was already moving toward the back room, already counting steps, when she heard it, a sound from outside the safe house that didn't belong to the Palmetto branches, or the Early Birds, or the county road. A car. More than one. Coming in without headlights. Harker was on her radio before Lena cleared the doorway. "All units. We have incoming on the south approach." The front window exploded inward. Not a bullet. A light, brilliant and blinding, a tactical flashbang that turned the entire front room white and compressed the air and made everything go momentarily horribly silent before the sound crashed back in all at once, disorienting and enormous. And through it she heard Noah cry out from the back room, high and sharp, and she was through the doorway and had him before the echo finished, her arms around him, pulling him off the cot and toward the back wall, away from the window, away from the door. "Close your eyes," she said, directly into his ear. "Don't open them. Don't make any sound. He pressed his face against her shoulder and didn't make a sound. From the front of the house, she heard Harker's voice on the radio, clipped commands, and then the sound of the front door going, and boots on the floor, and the particular controlled vocabulary of a tactical entry, voices identifying themselves, movement, the furniture being cleared, and then a different voice. Older. Smooth. The way a voice gets when it's been used to issue instructions for decades. "There's no need for anyone to be hurt," Victor Vale said. "I want the boy. That's all." Everyone else walks out. She pressed Noah against the wall and put herself between him and the door and looked at the window. Screen, no lock, low enough to the ground, and made the only calculation available to her. She punched the screen out with her palm, grabbed Noah, went through the window. The Florida dark was warm and thick with the smell of scrub brush, and she landed wrong on one ankle and it screamed at her, but she kept moving, Noah's hand in hers, both of them running low and fast through the palmetto scrub, away from the light pouring out of the safe house, away from the sound of the voices, into the dark. Her phone was in her left hand. She hadn't stopped to get it from the table. It wasn't there. She ran. The scrub went for maybe 200 yards before it hit a chain-link fence bordering what sounded like a drainage canal. She stopped there, pulling Noah close, both of them breathing hard. His inhaler was in the bag. The bag was inside. "Don't think about that," she told herself. She looked at her son's face in the thin pre-dawn. He was scared, genuinely, this time, not the performed composure of the doc, but he wasn't falling apart. His jaw was set. His hands were shaking, but his feet were planted. He looked, she thought, exactly like his father. "Someone's coming," Noah whispered. She turned. A figure was moving through the scrub from the direction of the house. Fast, low, navigating the palmetto, the way someone navigates terrain they've scouted, rather than terrain they're discovering. She pressed Noah behind her and grabbed the fence post with one hand, and had nothing in the other hand and no plan beyond the fence and the canal and the dark. The figure stopped 6 feet from her and pulled out a phone, turned the screen toward his own face so she could see him. It wasn't Victor's man. It wasn't Harker. It was Dominic. She stared at him. "You were in Savannah. I drove back the moment Harker told me about the safe house." He was breathing hard, the controlled breathing of someone who'd been running on adrenaline for hours and was managing it down to something functional. "Harker's team has the front of the house. Victor's people came in on the south. There's a gap. East side through the canal access road." He looked at Noah. Something moved through his face and went still. "Can you run?" Noah looked at him. "Yeah." "Then we run," Dominic said. He took Noah's other hand, and the three of them went into the dark together, and behind them the safe house burned with light and voices, and ahead of them there was nothing but the canal road and whatever came after it, and for the first time since the platform collapsed into the harbor 4 nights ago, Lena understood with complete and physical certainty that the version of her life she'd been maintaining was gone. The inn, the routines, the careful architecture of managed solitude, all of it was on the other side of a line she'd crossed without a chance to choose, and there was no going back to it, and the only direction available was forward, into whatever Dominic was leading them toward, into whatever came next. She ran. Hoot. The canal access road was gravel and darkness, and the particular silence of a place nobody used before dawn. Dominic led them along the fence line for 300 yards, before a rusted gate appeared in the chain link, padlocked, but the post on the left side had pulled free of the ground by 6 inches, enough to angle the whole section outward if you lifted and pushed. Dominic lifted. She pushed Noah through, went through herself. On the other side, a truck. Old, dark blue, Florida plates she didn't recognize. Dominic had the keys already in his hand. "Whose is this?" she said. "Harker's backup contact." She called it in when the south approach was confirmed. He got Noah into the back seat, and she got in the front, and the engine turned over low and steady, and they moved without headlights down the access road until they hit the county road, and then he turned east and gave it speed. Noah's breathing in the back seat was the only sound for a full minute. Then he said, "Is this because of me?" Lena turned around. He was sitting straight, both hands in his lap, looking at her with those eyes that saw too much and always had. No, she said. This is because of things that happened long before you were born. He looked at Dominic. Are you my dad? The truck held the road. The pre-dawn sky ahead of them was going from black to the particular dark blue that comes just before the gray. Dominic's hands were steady on the wheel. He didn't look away from the road, but something in his shoulders changed. Settled or broke open, she couldn't tell which. Yes, he said. Noah absorbed this the way he absorbed most things, completely, without performance. Okay, he said. Then, after a moment, I figured. Lena turned back to face the road. Her ankle throbbed. Her hands were still shaking. The waterproof folder with the documents was under her jacket where she'd grabbed it on the way out of the filing room 2 days ago. Still there, still intact. Dominic's phone lit up on the dash. Harker's number. He answered it on speaker. I have them, he said. Victor has the ledger, Harker said. But I need you to listen to me carefully, because what I'm about to tell you changes everything. The truck moved east into the coming dawn. There's a second ledger, Harker said. A second ledger, Dominic said. The truck did 60 on the empty county road, and the pre-dawn dark pressed against the windshield, and Harker's voice came through the phone speaker with the particular flatness of someone delivering information they'd verified 3 times before saying out loud. Your father was a paranoid man, Harker said. We knew about the Savannah ledger because your intermediaries mentioned it. What we didn't know, what Cruz apparently didn't know either, which is why he didn't tell Victor, is that your father maintained a duplicate, a secondary record, updated to within 6 months of his death, kept in a separate location entirely. Dominic's hand tightened on the wheel. How do you know this? Because Elena Voss told us. A beat. She's in custody, Harker said. She walked into the Savannah field office 40 minutes ago, voluntarily, with the document case. Another pause. She didn't take it for Victor. She took it to keep it away from him. She's been working a double game for 14 months, taking Victor's money to maintain access, feeding him enough to stay credible, and waiting for the moment she could pull the document before he could get to it directly. Lena watched Dominic's face in the dash light, watched him process the betrayal that wasn't a betrayal, the reversal of the reversal, the way the ground kept shifting under everything he thought he'd established. She could have told me, he said. She didn't trust your operation was clean, Harker said. After Cruz, she was right not to. A sound came from the back seat. Not Noah, just the truck's tires finding a rough patch and correcting. Lena turned. He was awake, listening, his face doing the careful work of a child who's decided the adults need the conversation more than he needs an explanation. The second ledger, Dominic said. Where? That's the problem. Your father gave the location to one person and one person only. Harker's voice shifted. He gave it to you, Dominic, 14 years ago. Your father sat you down and told you about a secondary location. He described it as insurance. Dominic was quiet for 10 seconds. Lena watched the road. The boat shed, he said, at my uncle's property on the Georgia coast. He called it insurance. He said if I ever needed leverage that couldn't be challenged, it was there. He exhaled. Not relief. Something more complex. I thought he was talking about cash. Does Victor know about the property? My uncle died in 2019. The property transferred to a land trust. Victor wouldn't have a reason to look there. It's not in the Vale Estate documentation. He was already calculating. She could see it in the set of his jaw. How long do we have before he realizes the Savannah ledger is gone? He'll know when Elena doesn't make contact. She was supposed to deliver it 2 hours ago. Harker's voice was clipped. You have maybe 90 minutes before he starts looking at alternatives. The Georgia property is 70 minutes from where we are. Then you're already behind. Dominic looked at Lena. She looked back at him. Noah, she said, without turning around. Yeah. There's going to be another drive. I know, he said. I've been listening. Ittown. The Georgia coast came up gray and salt-smelling as the sun broke the horizon. Dominic drove like a man who knew the roads, which he did. The uncle's property was 30 miles south of Savannah, a stretch of low marsh and live oak that had been in the family since before the organization existed, one of the few things that belonged to the Vales before they became what they became. He turned off the main road onto a crushed shell track, and the truck moved through the oaks with the branches closing overhead and the marsh visible through the tree line, flat and silver in the early light. The property was dark. A main house shuttered, a dock extending into the marsh creek, and at the end of the dock, the boat shed, weathered cedar, padlocked, sitting on pilings above the tidal water. He killed the engine 50 yards from the house. "Stay here," he said. "No," Lena said. He looked at her. "Noah stays in the truck," she said. "Doors locked. You don't go into that shed alone when Victor has a 90-minute head start, and we don't actually know where his people are." She held his gaze. "I go with you." He didn't argue. He looked at Noah. "Lock the doors," he said. "If anyone comes to the truck who isn't us, you get into the driver's seat and you lean on the horn. You don't stop until we come back." Noah looked at the horn, looked at Dominic. "Okay. Can you drive?" Noah's face did something complicated. "I'm 8. The pedals are there if you need them. You probably won't need them." "Probably," Noah said, in a tone that suggested he found this less reassuring than intended. Dominic put his hand briefly on the boy's shoulder. Just a second, barely contact, and got out of the truck. Lena got out. She heard the locks engage behind them. They moved through the oaks toward the dock in the gray morning light. The marsh smelled like low tide and mud, and the particular organic richness of water that's been sitting in the same place for a very long time. Her ankles still hurt. She ran on it anyway. The dock boards were soft with age and moisture. They moved heel to toe without discussing it, both arriving at the same conclusion about noise without conversation, and reached the boat shed in 40 seconds. Dominic produced a key from the ring he'd been carrying, old brass, the kind that belonged on a hook in a dead man's kitchen, and worked the padlock. It opened. The inside of the shed was dim and smelled like old fiberglass and marine grease. A flat-bottomed skiff on davits, shelves of rusted gear, and at the far end, behind a section of pegboard that held the silhouettes of tools long since removed, a steel cabinet bolted to the wall with a combination lock. "Your father gave you the combination?" she said. "My birthday," he said. He was sentimental about exactly one thing. He worked the dial. The cabinet opened. Inside, a fireproof document box, black, the kind sold in office supply stores, unremarkable. He lifted it out and his hands were steady, and she noticed this about him, that his hands were always steady when it mattered, that the stillness in him wasn't absence of feeling but something more disciplined than that. He opened the box. The ledger was inside, older than she'd expected, cloth-bound, the fabric faded to a gray-green, handwritten in the compressed script of a man who'd been recording information for decades. She didn't touch it. She looked at it the way you look at something that has the weight of many lives in it, which is what it was. "This is enough?" she said. "Combined with what Elena brought in?" "Yes." He closed the box. "This is everything." The dock moved under them. A subtle shift, tidal, the pilings adjusting to the water's pull. Ordinary, except that the shift came with a sound that didn't belong to the tide. A footstep. On the dock behind them. She turned. 3 men at the dock entrance. The one in front was not someone she recognized, but the 2 behind him were carrying the posture of men who'd been in this kind of situation before and had long since stopped feeling anything about it. The one in front had a phone in his hand, already raised, already transmitting. "Mr. Vale sends his regards," he said. Dominic moved in front of her. The document box went under his arm, held tight. "How long have you been on the property?" he said. His voice was very quiet. "Since midnight." The man in front, younger than the other 2, a manager's energy, someone who coordinated rather than executed, looked at the document box with the specific attention of someone who'd been told exactly what to look for. "We had 4 properties flagged. This was the 3rd one we checked." He almost sounded apologetic. "Mr. Vale would like the box." "No," Dominic said. The man with the phone said something into it. Lena heard the response, tinny, small, coming through the speaker, and recognized the voice. Victor Vale, live on the line, watching through the phone's camera. "Dominic," Victor said. The smooth voice, in this context, was almost surreal. "You look tired. I imagine it's been a long night." Dominic looked at the phone. "It's over, Victor. I keep hearing that." A pause. "And yet here we are." Hand them the box. "Elena is in federal custody. The Savannah ledger is with Harker. You have nothing. I have 3 men on a dock and your son in a truck 50 yards away." The voice stayed smooth, stayed warm. That was the most frightening thing about it. The warmth never left, not even now. "I'm not threatening the boy. I want to be very clear. I'm simply describing the geography." Lena's chest went cold and tight. Dominic's shoulders did not move. His hands did not move. But something behind his eyes went to a place she hadn't seen before. Past calculation, past strategy, down to something bedrock and absolute. "Tell your men to step back from the dock," he said. "The box, Dominic. Step them back, and I'll talk to you directly. In person, your location, my terms for security, 1 hour." His voice was flat and final. "That's the offer. The only one." A long silence on the phone. "You're not in a position to make offers. You came here for a ledger that will put you in a federal prison for the rest of your life," Dominic said. "I'm offering you a conversation before that becomes inevitable. That's more than you gave me 9 years ago when you decided my life was a variable you could adjust." The dock moved again. Tide. The marsh birds were starting now that the sun was up. Herons, egrets, the ordinary, beautiful, indifferent machinery of the natural world proceeding around the wreckage of human decisions. The phone was quiet for 8 seconds. 1 hour, Victor said. "Meridian Shipyard. You know it." "I know it." "Come alone." "No." Another pause. "Fine." "Bring the woman. Leave the box on the dock." "The box comes with me." A sound on the phone that might have been something close to amusement. "You've gotten harder, Dominic. I'll give you that." The line went quiet, and then the 3 men on the dock stepped back, 1 step, 2, creating a corridor. The one with the phone pocketed it and turned and walked back up the dock toward the oak trees without looking back, and the other 2 followed. And then the dock was empty and the marsh was making its ordinary sounds, and Lena realized she'd been holding her breath for approximately the last 2 minutes. She let it out. "The Meridian Shipyard," she said. "Abandoned. Been in receivership for 4 years. Victor's used it for meetings before. I know because it's in the operational files I gave Harker." He was already moving back up the dock. "Which means Harker knows it too." She understood. "You're going to tell her where you're going." "I'm going to tell her exactly where we're going, exactly when we'll be there, and let her position agents before Victor's people can sweep the perimeter." He pulled out his phone, Harker already in the recent calls. "Victor thinks I'm walking in alone with a document and a woman. He's not expecting the building to be pre-positioned. What if it doesn't work? What if his people get there first and sweep Harker's team out?" He looked at her directly. "Then I do it the other way." "What's the other way?" "I walk in and I don't walk out, and the box goes to Harker, and it's over for Victor regardless." He said it the way he said all the hard things, flat, without theater, like a man who'd already made the peace with the cost and wasn't going to perform the difficulty of it for anyone. "But that's not the plan. The plan is Harker." She looked at him. "You don't get to decide alone anymore," she said. "Whatever you're planning in that building, I'm there." "Lena, I'm there," she said. "Noah stays with Harker's team, but I'm there." She held his gaze until he stopped trying to find the argument. 9 years ago, you made decisions without me and it cost us everything. That's not happening again." He looked at her for a long moment in the early Georgia light, the marsh at their backs, the ledger under his arm, and she saw him make the decision. Not reluctantly, not as a concession, but as a man who understood that some equations only balance when you stop trying to solve them alone. He nodded. They went back to the truck. Noah took the situation with the focused calm of a child who'd spent the last 6 hours recalibrating his understanding of what a normal morning looked like. He didn't ask about the men on the dock. He asked if there was food. There wasn't. Dominic found a gas station 12 minutes from the shipyard, and Noah got a granola bar and a bottle of water and ate it in the back seat with the systematic efficiency of someone fueling for what came next. Parker's voice on the phone was clipped and precise. I can have 4 agents inside the Meridian structure within 40 minutes. Victor's people will do a sweep. I need them in place before that sweep. 35 minutes, Dominic said. That's tight. It's what we have. Fine. Noah? Lena answered. He's with us. There's an agent. Reyes, she's clean. I verified her personally. She'll meet you at the Meridian South lot. She takes the boys somewhere safe while you're inside. Non-negotiable. Lena looked at Noah in the mirror. He looked back at her. I'll go with the agent, he said. I'm not stupid. I know you're not, she said. Will you come back? The question sat in the truck cab, simple and enormous. Yes, she said. He looked at Dominic. Yes, Dominic said. Noah looked at them both with the particular assessment of someone deciding whether to believe the answer or accept it regardless. He accepted it. He went back to the granola bar. The Meridian shipyard was exactly what the name promised. Dead industry, rusted ambition, the bones of something that had once moved product and now moved nothing. The main structure was a massive corrugated steel building that sat on a concrete apron above a deep-water slip, the slip empty, the water below it dark and still. Cargo cranes stood motionless against the sky. The smell was rust and marine oil, and the salt wind coming off the Atlantic 300 yards east. Agent Reyes was in the south lot when they arrived, young, compact, with close-cut hair, and the watchful stillness of someone who'd done this kind of handoff before. She crouched to Noah's level without making a production of it, and said something low to him that made him nod. And then she stood and looked at Lena and said, I'll have him back to you inside 2 hours, with the precision of a promise rather than a reassurance. Lena put her hand on Noah's face. He leaned into it for exactly 1 second before he straightened up and went with Reyes and didn't look back. Because looking back was something he'd decided not to do, and she loved him so much it moved through her like a physical thing, like weather, like the tide. She turned. Dominic was looking at the shipyard building. He had the document box under one arm and his jacket open and his face arranged into the stillness she'd come to understand was not calm, but its functional equivalent. He looked at her. Stay close, he said, on my left. If anything moves wrong, you go back the way we came. Not for me. For him. Understood. I mean it, Lena. I know you mean it. She looked at the building. Let's go. They walked across the concrete apron in the full morning sun, and the shipyard was loud with the sound of the wind in the crane cables, a low metallic singing that didn't stop, and the Atlantic glittered beyond the slip, and it was almost beautiful in the way that dangerous places sometimes are, when the light hits them right and the human stakes are briefly invisible. Victor Vale was waiting inside. He was exactly what she'd expected and nothing she'd been prepared for. 60s, silver-haired, with the bearing of a man who'd spent decades in rooms where everyone else was already positioned before he arrived. He stood in the center of the shipyard floor with 2 men behind him and the particular stillness of someone who'd already decided how this ended. He looked at Lena first. Ms. Hartwell, he said, I've been wanting to meet you properly. I know, she said. You made that clear on the phone. A slight smile, deployed. You're not what I expected. Good. His eyes moved to the document box, then to Dominic. The smile remained, but the quality of it changed, something colder coming into the surface of it. The ledger, he said. In a moment, Dominic said. We're going to talk first. We are talking. We're going to talk about Elena Voss. Something shifted in Victor's face, small, controlled, but there. She made her choices. She made them because you gave her no others. Same playbook you always use. Dominic's voice was steady. He moved 2 steps closer. The 2 men behind Victor adjusted. 14 years, Victor. You've been running variations of the same play for 14 years. Identify the vulnerability. Fill it. Control the outcome. Another step. You're good at it, I'll give you that. Victor looked at him with the patience of a man who'd waited 20 years for one thing and could wait another 5 minutes. The box, Dominic. Here's what's happening instead. Dominic set the box down on the concrete between them, stood up. Harker has the Savannah Ledger. She has Elena Voss's testimony. She has 4 years of my cooperation documentation. And she has, he looked at his watch, approximately 12 agents in this building right now. The 2 men behind Victor moved their hands. Don't, Dominic said. Quiet. Absolute. From the shadows of the upper gantry, the red dot of a laser sight appeared on the nearer man's chest, then a second dot, then a third from different angles. The men behind Victor went very still. Victor looked up at the gantry, around the floor. He didn't rush it. He took his time, the way a man takes stock of a room when he's determining whether the situation is salvageable. His face through the whole of it remained composed. When he looked back at Dominic, the smile was gone. You'd take down your own family's name, he said. You're not my family. Dominic's voice was very quiet. You never were. You were the man my father trusted because he didn't see what you were doing until it was too late, and then he died and left me to figure it out. He took one final step so that there were 6 feet between them and no pretense of anything except the plain fact of it. 9 years ago, you took something from me. You decided my life was a problem to solve, and you solved it, and you moved on. I've spent 4 years making sure that when this moment came, it would be the last move you ever got to make. Victor looked at him. Really looked at him the way a man looks at something he's underestimated, and the specific quality of that look, the recognition in it, the recalculation, was the most honest thing Lena had seen on his face. You'll testify, Victor said, against everything, everyone, the whole structure. That includes people who will come after you for the rest of your life. I know. You're willing to live that way. Dominic looked at Lena. 1 second, then back to Victor. I'm willing to live, he said. From the south entrance, Harker came through the door with 4 agents, and the dots on Victor's men multiplied, and the morning light came through the gaps in the corrugated roof in long diagonal shafts. And Victor Vale stood in one of those shafts with his hands at his sides, and the look of a man who had just understood, with complete and final clarity, that the play he'd been running for 20 years had run out of board. He put his hands up. Not dramatically, not with rage or the theatrical collapse of a man who'd imagined this moment differently. He raised both hands to shoulder height with the quiet efficiency of someone completing a transaction, and his face through the whole of it stayed composed, because Victor Vale had spent 60 years being the most controlled person in every room, and he wasn't going to stop now, not even for this. Dominic, he said, as Harker's agents moved past him toward the 2 men behind. Dominic waited. Your father would have... Don't, Dominic said. Whatever you're about to say about my father, don't. Victor closed his mouth. The agents reached him, and he cooperated with the mechanical precision of a man who understood that cooperation at this stage was the only remaining form of control available to him. Harker cuffed him herself. Lena noticed that, the deliberateness of it, and said something low into his ear that made his jaw tighten once before he smoothed it back out. Then they walked him toward the south door, and the morning light swallowed him, and he was gone. The shipyard went quiet. Lena stood on the concrete floor with the rust smell and the wind in the crane cables, and her ankle throbbing and her hands finally still. Dominic picked up the document box from the floor. He stood there with it under his arm and looked at the space where his cousin had been standing 30 seconds ago, and she let him look. Then she crossed the floor to him. He turned when she was close. He looked like what he was, a man who'd been running on purpose and adrenaline for 72 hours, and had just arrived at the end of both. The stillness in his face was different now. Not managed, actual. It's done, she said. Not entirely. His voice was rough at the edges. Testimony, proceedings. That's months. I know, but this part. She looked at the door Victor had gone through. This part is done. He looked at her. The morning light came through the roof gaps and landed between them on the concrete, ordinary and unhurried, the way light falls on everything equally without caring what it illuminates. Noah's waiting, she said. Something in his face broke open, not collapsed, broke open, the way a window breaks to let air through, and he nodded once, and she turned toward the south exit, and he fell into step beside her, and they walked out of the Meridian shipyard together into the full morning sun, leaving the document box with Harker and leaving the 20 years of damage inside the building behind them, walking toward the south lot where a boy with his father's eyes was sitting on the hood of a federal vehicle, eating the second half of a granola bar, and watching the Atlantic glitter beyond the shipyard fence like it had nowhere else to be and all the time in the world. Noah saw them coming and got down off the hood. He walked toward them, and Dominic slowed without meaning to, the way a person slows when they're approaching something they've been moving toward for a very long time and aren't quite ready for it to stop being ahead of them and start being here. Noah stopped in front of him, looked up. "You okay?" Noah said. Dominic looked at his son in the morning light. "Yeah," he said. "I'm okay." Noah nodded, accepting this, and then did something entirely unexpected. He stepped forward and put his arms around Dominic's waist and pressed his face against his ribs, and Dominic's free hand came down on the back of the boy's head with the careful weight of something that had been waiting a very long time to land there, and the three of them stood in the sun outside the dead shipyard while the Atlantic wind moved through the cranes and the world went on around them exactly as it always had, indifferent and bright and full of ordinary light. Lena watched them. She didn't move toward them yet. She gave them the moment because it belonged to them, and she wasn't going to take a single second of it back. Then Noah said, muffled against Dominic's ribs, "You smell like a boat shed." Dominic made a sound that was almost a laugh, rough, unpracticed, like something that hadn't been used in a long time and wasn't sure of itself yet. "Yeah," he said. "Probably." Noah pulled back and looked up at him with those eyes. "Can we get actual food now? Not granola bars." Lena finally moved toward them. "Yeah," she said. "We can get food." They ate at a diner 20 minutes from the shipyard, a place with vinyl booths and a laminated menu and a waitress who called everyone honey without discrimination and refilled coffee without being asked. Noah ordered pancakes and ate them with the focused intensity of someone making up for a significant caloric deficit. Dominic ordered eggs he mostly didn't touch. Lena drank 3 cups of coffee and ate half a piece of toast and watched the morning traffic move on the state road outside the window and let the ordinary noise of the place, the clatter of plates, the low country music from the corner speaker, the bell over the door, settle over her like something she'd forgotten she needed. Nobody talked much. That was fine. The silence between them had changed quality somewhere between the shipyard and the parking lot, had gone from the compressed silence of people managing a crisis to something looser and more habitable. Noah fell asleep against the window before his plate was cleared, one cheek pressed against the glass, his breathing slow and even, completely out. Dominic watched him sleep. Lena watched Dominic watch him. "He does that," she said. "Crashes hard after adrenaline. He gets it from me." Dominic looked at her. "You crashed?" "Not visibly." She turned her coffee cup. "Inside." He almost smiled. "Not quite." The waitress came and cleared Noah's plate with the practiced quiet of someone who'd seen tired families in corner booths her whole career and knew when to be gentle about it. Dominic paid before Lena could reach for her wallet. She let him, because it wasn't the moment for that particular argument, and because some part of her recognized that he needed the small, ordinary act of it, the normalcy of picking up a check in a diner after the worst week either of them had lived through. They sat another 20 minutes while Noah slept. The country music cycled through something slow. The morning traffic thinned. "What happens now?" she said. "Procedurally." He set down his coffee. "Harker's team processes the ledger and the Savannah documents together. Combined with Elena's testimony and 4 years of my cooperation files, the federal case moves to grand jury within 60 days. Victor's arraignment is probably this week." He paused. "The organization's assets get frozen today. Most of the senior personnel will be offered cooperation agreements or face indictment. The ones who cooperate dismantle what's left of the structure from the inside." He looked at the table. "It'll take 2 years to fully prosecute. Maybe 3. I'll be testifying for most of that." "Where?" "Wherever they need me." He looked up. "I'd like it to be somewhere near Harbor View, if that's something that could work." She looked at him directly. He held it. "That's not a small thing to ask," she said. "I know." "You're asking to be near Noah, which means near me, which means all three of us figuring out what that looks like when the adrenaline is gone. And it's just Tuesday. And he has swim practice, and I have a maintenance contractor I still haven't yelled at properly." Something moved across his face that was the closest thing to vulnerable she'd seen on him. "Yes, that's what I'm asking." She breathed in, breathed out, looked at her son asleep against the window, his mouth slightly open, one hand curled under his chin. "We start slow," she said. "You don't get to be his father overnight. You don't get to come in and rearrange everything because the crisis is over. You build it, the way you build anything that's worth having." "I know. And you tell me the truth, every time, about everything. If something's coming, legal, organizational, whatever residue this leaves, I hear it first, not after." "Yes." She looked at him. "Okay," she said. "We start slow." He nodded, and she saw the thing in him that had been held very tightly for a very long time ease by some small degree, not disappear, just ease, the way a muscle releases when you finally stop asking it to carry what it's been carrying. Noah made a small sound in his sleep and shifted against the window and didn't wake up. They drove back to Harborview that afternoon. Harker called twice during the drive, once to confirm the ledger had been transferred to the federal evidence facility in Atlanta, once to confirm Victor's arraignment had been scheduled for Thursday. She was efficient and brief both times and ended both calls without ceremony, which Lena had come to understand was her version of warmth. The third call was from Elena Voss. Dominic took it on speaker at Lena's look. His hands were steady on the wheel, but she noticed the particular set of his jaw when the call connected, the specific tension of a man managing something he hadn't fully processed yet. "I owe you an explanation," Elena said. Her voice was precise and slightly formal, the voice of a woman who'd spent 6 years managing someone else's professional life and had organized her own speech patterns accordingly. "Yes," Dominic said. "I found out about Cruz 14 months ago. He'd been accessing your files in ways that weren't consistent with his clearance. I started documenting it." A pause. "I couldn't tell you because I didn't know who else Victor had. I didn't know if the people you trusted were trustworthy, so I worked around it." "You took Victor's money." "To maintain access and credibility, yes." She didn't apologize for it. Every piece of information I fed him was calibrated to keep him confident without advancing his position. It was the most difficult thing I've done in my professional life, and I would make the same choice again. Dominic was quiet for a moment. "You should have trusted me. You should have told me 4 years ago that you were dismantling the organization," she said, without heat. "We were both managing information we should have shared. That's on both of us." Another pause. "Are you all right?" he said. "I'm in federal protective custody eating vending machine sandwiches, so by some measures, no." The precision in her voice softened almost imperceptibly. "But the situation is resolved, so by the measures that matter, yes." A beat. "Take care of your family, Dominic." She hung up. The highway unrolled ahead of them, and Noah slept in the back seat, and the afternoon light came through the windshield warm and flat, and Lena thought about the 14 months Elena Voss had spent in the precise, exhausting work of playing both sides simultaneously, maintaining a performance of betrayal in service of the opposite, and felt something she hadn't expected to feel about a woman she'd never met. Respect, simple and complete. "She's good at her job," Lena said. "She's extraordinary at her job," Dominic said. "I didn't deserve it." "No," Lena agreed. "You should have told her." He didn't argue. She gave him credit for that. The Harborview Inn looked exactly as she'd left it. This was somehow the most disorienting thing about coming back. That the building was simply there, unchanged, the lanterns still strung along the dock, the sign at the entrance with the H in Harborview still slightly crooked in the way she'd been meaning to fix since April. Dolores had apparently managed the occupancy with her characteristic competence. Every room showed occupied or turned over, the parking lot was orderly, the lobby windows were clean. Carla was on the side patio when they pulled in, a glass of iced tea in front of her and the specific expression of a woman who had been watching the entrance for some time. She stood up when she saw Lena. Lena got out of the truck, and Carla crossed the patio and hugged her. Not the careful social hug, the other kind, the one that means I was worried and I'm glad you're here. And Lena let herself be held for a full 3 seconds before she pulled back. You look terrible, Carla said. Thank you. Carla looked past her at Dominic, who had come around the truck, then at Noah, still sleep-rumpled, climbing out of the back seat with his swim bag. Noah, she said, you hungry? I have leftover Gulf shrimp from the lunch service. Yes, sapti sayats, Noah said immediately, with a conviction that suggested the pancakes had already been forgotten. Carla took him inside without further ceremony, and Lena stood in the parking lot with Dominic in the late afternoon light and looked at the inn she'd spent 8 years building into something that worked, something that was hers, and felt the strange doubled sensation of being home and being somewhere she was seeing clearly for the first time. I need to check in with Dolores, she said. Go, he said. I'll find a room for tonight. The Pelican, if they have availability. There's a room here, she said. It came out before she'd decided to say it. She let it stand. It's a guest room, room 9. It's been empty since the platform collapse scared off the reservation. She met his eyes. You don't need to stay at the Pelican. He looked at her. Room 9, he said. Room 9. He nodded. She went inside. The next 3 weeks moved in the way of time after a crisis, both faster than it should and weighted differently than ordinary time, each day carrying a residue of the days before it that normal days don't carry. Lena ran the inn. She answered Harker's calls and attended 2 preliminary federal briefings where she gave a witness statement that took 4 hours and left her drained in a way that was different from physical exhaustion, a kind of cellular tiredness that sleep helped but didn't cure. She fixed the H in the sign. She finally yelled at the maintenance contractor properly. She slept mostly, and sometimes didn't, and on the night she didn't, she came downstairs to the kitchen and found the light already on because Dominic didn't sleep well either, and had apparently decided the kitchen was the appropriate place to not sleep, and they sat across from each other at the kitchen table with coffee and didn't always talk, and sometimes that was better than talking. Noah adapted the way children adapt, with a speed and completeness that was slightly humbling to witness. He absorbed Dominic's presence into his daily life with the pragmatic efficiency of someone integrating a new variable into an established system. He asked questions, but the questions were practical rather than emotional. Whether Dominic knew how to fix outboard motors, whether he'd ever been in a real fight, whether he preferred the Gulf to the Atlantic. Dominic answered all of them honestly, including the one about the fight, and Noah listened with the gravity of someone taking inventory. The swimming continued. Dominic came to the second Saturday practice, and the third, and stood at the chain-link fence in the morning light while Noah worked his stroke in the far lane, and Lena stood beside him, and neither of them said anything about it being the thing it was. She told Noah on a Wednesday evening, 3 weeks after Harborview. She'd been planning the conversation for days, the words, the order of them, the way to make something complicated accessible to an 8-year-old without reducing it to something false. She sat across from him at the kitchen table after dinner and told him the truth in the simplest version of it, that she and Dominic had known each other a long time ago, that some people had worked very hard to keep them apart, that she hadn't known Dominic didn't know about him until recently. Noah listened to all of it without interrupting, which was unusual. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. Is that why we had to leave in the middle of the night? He said. Yes. Because of those people. Yes. And they're gone now. They're being dealt with by people whose job it is to deal with them. He thought about this. Are you and him? Are you going to be together? She looked at her hands on the table. I don't know yet. We're figuring it out. He considered that with the same gravity he'd given the question about the Atlantic. He fixed the outboard on the dock skiff, Noah said. I know. It's been broken since last October. I know, Noah. I'm just saying. He picked up his fork and finished the last of his rice. He's pretty useful to have around. She looked at her son, felt something in her chest that was warm and complicated and not entirely unlike laughter. Yeah, she said. He kind of is. Victor Vale's arraignment was on a Thursday. Dominic drove to Savannah for it, He didn't ask Lena to come, and she didn't offer. It was his to attend. The last piece of business from a previous life, the formal beginning of the legal process that would take what remained of the next 2 years and grind it into something conclusive. She watched him leave from the lobby window at 6 in the morning, the rental car moving down the empty boardwalk road, and then she went and made coffee and opened the inn for the day. He called at 2 in the afternoon. "Done," he said. "How was it?" A pause. Strange. He looked smaller. Another pause, longer. He looked like a man who'd spent 60 years building himself into something enormous and was now just a person in a room being read charges. Was it enough? Seeing it? He thought about that. It was accurate. That's something. She stood at the front desk with the afternoon lobby quiet around her. "Come back when you're ready. There's no rush." "I'll be back by 7. "I'll save you dinner." A beat. "Lena." "Yeah." "Thank you," he said. "For—" He stopped, started differently. "For room 9. She looked out the lobby window at the boardwalk in the afternoon sun. The lanterns were still strung along the dock, not lit yet, waiting for evening. The Gulf was flat and silver, and the pelicans were doing their ancient slow circles above the water. "Come home," she said, and hung up before either of them had to figure out what to do with that. The weeks that followed were not easy in the way stories sometimes suggest. The aftermath of hard things can be easy. The federal proceedings required Dominic's presence at intervals, depositions, briefings, 2 preliminary hearings where he sat in rooms with attorneys and gave testimony that was precise and exhaustive and cost him something each time that he didn't talk about, but that she could see in his face when he came back. She didn't ask him to talk about it. She made dinner and let Noah commandeer his evenings with fishing tackle and swim statistics and the particular conversational agenda of a 9-year-old who decided a person was worth his time, which was the highest endorsement available in that household. Elena Voss's cooperation agreement was finalized 6 weeks after the arraignment. Lena read the summary Harker sent without being asked to. Harker had started sending her summaries, which was its own kind of acknowledgement. Elena had given testimony covering 14 months of documented intelligence, every communication with Victor's organization, and a complete account of Daniel Cruz's infiltration. In exchange, she received a full immunity agreement and federal witness protection for 1 year. After the year, she was free. Lena thought about her sometimes, the specific discipline it took to maintain a double performance for 14 months, to be the thing you were pretending to be completely enough to be believed, while simultaneously being the thing you actually were. She understood it better than she might have expected. She'd spent 8 years maintaining her own version of a performance, the competent, unbothered, entirely self-sufficient woman who needed nothing she didn't already have. It was less dramatic than Elena's version, but the mechanics were the same. You built the surface carefully enough that eventually you stopped distinguishing between the surface and what was underneath. Dominic had been the thing that cracked the surface, not the crisis, not the fireworks platform or the harbor or Victor's men in the safe house. Him, specifically, the way he'd said he's going to be fine from the dark water, the way he'd put those shoes at the bottom of the back stairs, the way his hand had stayed on Noah's shoulder for exactly the amount of time that was needed, and then come away without making anything of it. The small things. They were always the small things. Bam. She found him on the dock at 7 on a Tuesday morning in late September, 6 weeks after the arraignment. He was where Noah usually was, sitting on the overturned bucket at the dock's edge, not fishing, just sitting with his forearms on his knees and his eyes on the water. The Gulf was calm, and the light was the particular gold of early fall mornings on the coast, the angle of it lower now, less punishing than August. She brought 2 coffees and sat beside him on an upturned crate. He took the coffee without looking away from the water. They sat without talking for a while. A brown pelican crossed their field of view in its improbable, ancient way, too big, too prehistoric, somehow perfectly suited to exactly this. She watched it until it was gone behind the dock's far end. "The harbor master's office closed the platform collapse investigation," she said. "Negligence finding against the maintenance contractor. The contractor's insurance is paying out." "Good. The platform's being replaced with a permanent fixed structure. Better moorings. They're talking about expanding the 4th of July show next year. He looked at her then, something in the corner of his eyes. Full circle, he said. Something like that. She turned her coffee cup in her hands. The dock moved slightly under them, the tidal shift familiar as breathing. I want to ask you something, she said. Ask. The night you came to Harborview, the 4th of July. She looked at the water. If the platform hadn't collapsed, if Noah hadn't gone in, were you going to come to the inn? He was quiet for a moment. Yes, he said. That night? Eventually, I'd been in town 2 days. I was working up to it. He paused. I didn't know how to begin. After 9 years, I didn't know what the first sentence was. She nodded slowly. What was it going to be? She said. The first sentence. He looked at her. I was going to say that I never stopped looking, he said. That's all. Just that. The dock held them both, rocking gently on the water, in the gold morning light of a season changing over slowly, the way seasons do on the Gulf Coast. Not all at once, but in accumulation, 1 degree at a time, until one morning you realize the quality of everything has shifted, and you can't point to exactly when it happened. Lena reached out and set her hand over his. He turned his palm up and held it. They stayed like that until Noah's alarm went off in the apartment above the inn. The cheerful electronic insistence of it, 2 minutes early, same as always, and then the sound of him moving around up there, getting dressed, the particular thump of one sneaker and then the other, and his voice calling down asking if there was breakfast and what they were doing out on the dock so early, his voice still rough with sleep and curious and entirely itself. Dominic looked up toward the window. She looked at him looking. Come on, she said. She stood up, still holding his hand. Come make breakfast with me. He stood. He didn't let go. They walked back down the dock together toward the inn's side door in the morning light, and behind them the Gulf lay flat and silver and enormous, indifferent to everything that had happened on its edges over the last 9 years, moving the way it always moved, the way it would keep moving, tied in and tied out, the rhythm of it older than any of the damage human beings were capable of doing to each other or to themselves, older than betrayal or forgiveness or the complicated and necessary work of building a life in the aftermath of both. Noah appeared in the doorway above them before they reached it. Hair sideways, mismatched socks, the paperback from the safe house in one hand because he'd apparently finished and restarted it. He looked at their joined hands. He looked at their faces. He turned around and went back inside. There's eggs, he called back. Someone has to actually cook them, though. Lena looked at Dominic. He looked at her. For the first time in 9 years, the future was not something she was managing or surviving or building defensive walls around. It was simply there, ahead of them, open and ordinary and entirely possible, the way a morning is possible before it becomes a day. She opened the door. They went inside.